Welcome to the Business Brains Podcast, the podcast where we interview smart people in the world of business and through osmosis, hope to get a little smarter ourselves. Today's guest is a man who is the founder and chief creative officer of the highly innovative marketing company, Church and State, which is combining traditional advertising along with social media content creation. It's a very innovative idea. Clients include Walmart, DoorDash. Before that, he was a copywriter and a creative director at numerous agencies across Canada. He is also a legitimate stand-up comedian and published author. His book, Think, Do, Say, The 7 Things Successful People Do Every Day, provides a framework for how people and companies can operate in a world of increasing transparency. We'll get into that. He's also written for the stage, written for television, hosted the award-winning comedy show Monkey Toast, and created the podcast The Coup, very enjoyable podcast, which is much better than this podcast. He's a Renaissance man and currently the greatest keynote speaker in the world. The pride of Oshawa, Ontario. Ladies and gentlemen, present to you, Ron, hold on tight. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Thanks, Paul. That's a very kind introduction.
So, Ron, you were referred to me by a mutual friend of ours, Tony Miller.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, how did you meet Tony? What was your first impressions of Tony when you met him?
Well, Tony was... So Tony was my boss, but
Mine
Tony
too.
was put in this weird position where I was at an agency, that agency had acquired another agency, and as part of that, their creative director got brought into the mix. But then Tony was hired before that person was let go. Like, it was just I just felt for Tony, because as things happen in advertising, he was put into this very weird position, sitting in another office, kind of waiting to take over the creative department, basically.
Oh, okay.
And I had been an account guy. I had been an account director, but that had, kind of been on stage and everything, and I got caught in a hotel fire and decided to, I told my boss that my life flashed before my eyes and account services didn't make the final cut. And so I wanted to move into the creative department. So Tony kind of inherited this mess of a creative department, as well as me, a guy who had only just started writing formally in advertising. And he was he was just like, no bullshit, right? Like, just no bullshit. But also no bullshit in a, like, I'm going to tell you. Like, he was just such a great guy, and nothing seemed to bother him. And he taught me how to write. He taught me how to write, and he taught me how to think. He has a very specific way of thinking about campaigns, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can go at it. But Tony was such a prolific writer that's how he kind of generated campaign ideas, where he would write 50 headlines and then go, oh, like there's a bigger idea in that headline. And then he would extrapolate the idea out of the headline, which is such a writer's first kind of approach to creative thinking. But at the end of the day, Tony taught me how to write. And now 2 books later, I owe him a lot.
That's incredible, because I was just thinking about your backstory and your career, and it's just amazing because your superpower seems to be spoken and written words. That is what you are great at. That's what you've built your life on, it seems like. Would that be accurate, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think getting, kind of being comfortable in presenting ideas to people in a kind of a unique and entertaining way. And then once I knew how to do that, then it was like the writing was a written version of that. So I kind of write how I speak. And so there are speakers who write and writers who speak. So even though I was trained as a writer in the business, I think I'm still a speaker first writer, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. I mean, I've run into so many different personalities in my life, and it's funny because people do tend to fall into certain brain types. I feel like there are people who just love numbers. They get into finance, accounting, and they're great at that. There's people who, art directors who just want to sit there and not talk to anybody and just work on their art forever. And
Yep.
there's people like yourself who just love to talk, love to write, love communicating, through words. It really is an advertise. I think you made the right decision, by the way, getting out of accounts
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
into
thank
writing.
you.
'Cause I think it's worked out fine for you. But yeah, it's just so fascinating how I feel like in general, when I was growing up, the work it felt like you as a person were malleable. Anyone could do anything. But then as you grow up, you're like, no, people really do have proclivities, and they should be in certain roles because they have
Yeah.
natural proclivities. I feel like,
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? As you get older, that when you're younger, you should be exploring, you should be really flexible and malleable to do a bunch of different things. But at some point, you got to monetize it, right? Like, and I don't mean, it's such a horrible phrase to use, but at some point you have to, and it's not about you need to make a lot of money, but you need to kind of get your expertise to a level that you become even better at something, and you need to operationalize it. Like there's a big difference between when I was doing 10 and 20 speeches a year and now I do about 70. And
oh
the
wow,
biggest issue is operationalizing it. You can't do 70 speeches and write a brand new speech every time. Because, just 2 months ago, I did 3 speeches in 18 hours. You can't do that. So there's an efficiency that comes with the expertise. And in order to do that, you need to kind of zero in. And now that you've got the natural feel for it, now it's like, how do I operationalize it to do it in a really, really efficient way? Because now I can, and whether that's now I can make more money, or I can serve more people, or I can help more people, or whatever your thing is. But to scale it, you need to focus on it.
you mentioned scaling before, and scaling your attributes. Everyone has attributes, and the ability to scale your attributes is really a superpower. You seem to have been able to scale your personality um, and your experiences in a very effective way. And the way you're just speaking, actually,
Yeah.
and refining your presentation, it's similar to the way stand-up comedians refine their hour of special over a long time, and then they just hammer it down and hammer it down until they get it perfectly,
Yeah.
and then they can relax and like move in and out of it if they need to during different situations. I think that your stand-up background probably trained you unconsciously for that, for what you're doing right now, it seems like.
100%. 100%. I take a stand-up approach to speaking, and I do, and it's evolved, and it's kind of extended into books. So what a lot of people do is they write a book. They spend a lot of time researching a specific topic, and they research the hell out of that book, out of that topic, and then they go, okay, I've now got the book, and they write the book, and then like a musician, they now tour the book. And so that's the way they do it. That's kind of a writer first approach to that. I do the opposite. I have a stand-up brain. So what I do is I go, I think there's something here. Like, I think there's a weird thing here. And I'll start working what I call the new two. And I start working the new two of like, here's 2 new minutes, here's 2 new minutes, here's 2 new minutes, as I evolve one topic into a variety of other topics. And then when I go, okay, and I got this interesting topic now, or it's a response to something like the topic I'm speaking on and writing on now is this thing called Now What? And it's like, it's in response to like a post-pandemic high inflation, high interest rate world. So like, what is the effect on that? So is this external thing that affected like, oh shit, I need to know something. So I'll come up with a core and then go new to, new to, new to, new to, new to, new to, new to. I keep going. I do that speech or a version of that speech. And I don't say I only do one speech. I'll do whatever. I can do a million different speeches. I just dial some stuff up and some stuff down. But I keep touring the speech. And while I'm doing that, I'm really active on LinkedIn. And the reason I'm really active on LinkedIn is I don't really give a shit about followers and likes and all that kind of stuff. I use LinkedIn as an open mic night. So I read an article that inspires a thought. I share the thought with the article and I get feedback on my thinking. And then if it's interesting, I go, oh, this is cool. I'm going to work this into the speech. So I'm always developing material by responding to articles and integrating it into the speech. And then I get to a point where I'm at now where I go, okay, I got 3 hours of content. I got a book. Now I got a book. And so I've just started writing the third book, and it's based on the speech that I've been giving for the past year. So the speech is always, always evolving. And then it gets to a point where it's like, now I need to sit down and do this in book form. So it's
That's
like Chris Rock doing leading up to the HBO special, except my speech is never done.
Mhm.
But it does get to that point where the HBO special is like, or the Netflix special, where it's like, okay, now I know what the book is.
Yeah, and you also the new two you're talking about that because you have many techniques, you have many mind tricks that you follow as you developed over your life, which you've presented in your books and in your LinkedIn post, which is great by the way. Everyone should follow Ron on LinkedIn.
Oh,
But
thanks.
one thing I've noticed is I've dabbled in some writing myself. Is one of the best things I ever did was get involved in improv,
Yep.
and like you were just speaking about improv, you get something, you get some kind of stimulus, some kind of word, or someone says something, or some kind of rule, and then your mind starts going.
Yeah.
You have to adapt to it. You have to create something out of it, and that little moment of improvisation literally changed my brain, where I was able to actually think of a lot more ideas. It's sort of like doing physical push-ups for your brain as far as
Right.
idea creation goes. So I think your improvisation and your stand-up comedy really informs your speaking career and your agency career as well as a copywriter. It seems like those things which are very rarely spoken about when developing your people as writers. You did it, I think maybe by accident or just it was your natural proclivity, but I think it really benefited you.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I certainly didn't consciously think about it. It was just always kind of chasing what I was curious about. And like, I never had dreams of being a stand-up comedian. I just wanted to, I always loved it as a craft. And I wanted to immerse myself in it. And so I was like, well, then just do it.
Yeah.
And it did come rather naturally. I think with like, I'm part Italian, part Quebecois, and I grew up with a very large extended family that told stories, and they knew the art of the bit. Like the stories were told in the exact same way with the right beats, with the right characters, and everything. And so I think that's where I learned how to be a stand-up, was not from other stand-ups, but from my family. Um, and then out of that, then you just, I don't know, you just chase stuff that you think is interesting and compelling, and that things that I was really curious about. And then other stuff where it's like, that's a valid pursuit. I just have no curiosity about that whatsoever. I don't care to solve that problem. I don't care to become good in that skill, but you go ahead. I think one of the biggest things is I talked about, like, I don't care about followers or engagement or any of that social media, the metrics behind social media. And like, but if you post at 9 a.m. and if you use this term and if you cut your videos this way, you end up with, like, I don't care about any of that shit. And people are like, if you just did this one thing, you would get more followers. And I go like, I don't care. And that's the stand-up brain, which is, this to me is all art. It's all art. It's business focused art. It's art that I'm getting that I pursue in a variety of different ways, but it's art. And I'm not gonna sacrifice the art and make it something else because that's gonna get me 5 more likes or 5 more follows or like any of that. I just don't care for any of that. I think people see through that shit. And I think if you play the long game, you're better off in the end.
Yeah, I completely agree. Social media has created this distributed network of everyone's personality now. You don't need to follow a format. You don't need to follow anything. In the past, if you were a writer, there was certain things you could only have careers in,
Yeah.
journalism, television. There's maybe 20 possible career. Even that seems a lot, maybe like 15
Yeah.
structures you could write for. But now everything's completely unstructured. You can create your own structures. People are doing it on TikTok, on YouTube all the time. We're getting a little bit off course. I wanted to get your biography first, so I
Yeah,
think
sure.
we can.
Okay, yeah.
So
You can tell me to shut up at any time and
no.
refocus
This is
myself.
great. This is why I got you on the show. But the show is generally, it's supposed to be a business podcast, but
Yeah.
we can get in a lot of things. I would like to know, you're the owner of Church and State. We'll get into that, but I would like to know your biographical and career journey leading up to opening Church and State, and I would like you to start at high school. What was Ron Hold On Tight, like in high school?
Well, let's say this in a really cheesy way. I'm not the person I am today, or I wasn't the person I am today.
Well, I hope not.
In that, yeah, I came from, pretty in high school. I was really trying to find myself, and I think that nobody knew that. I think I was a popular kid. I was like student council prime minister. I was on the wrestling team. I was a leader. I was very comfortable on stage. Like I was hosting events and things like that. I did in my very first kind of comedy-ish type stuff. I did like in high school, I did like a Bill Cosby bit like before the school. And so there was all that.
Sorry, which bit?
Oh, my very first thing I ever did was the dentist. FABCBEB might be Fabies.
Oh yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know Ozark in my school, by the way. Go ahead.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Noah.
But I was in
Fumba.
And he's like, I need you to build an ark. Right.
What's an ark? Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And we now have to refer to him as the man who can't be named.
Yeah, it sucks, but what are you gonna do?
But that was this weird, like you try and do the things that you think you're supposed to do. And so I didn't know that I was a creative person. I had no idea, because nobody in my family had been creative. There was no idea. What are you talking about? Artists and things like that. I grew up quite poor. And so the what's beat into you is you're going to get an education, you're going to get a good job, and you're going to make something of yourself, which is noble. And I think my mom wanted the best for us. So I kind of did that thing where I was like, oh, like I didn't know anything else. So I was going to teach, because my wrestling coach was someone I really respected. And I'm like, well, what did you do? And he's like, well, I went to Queens phys ed. I'm like, all right, I'll do that. And so, yeah, I was on the wrestling team, and then I was, went to Queens and did phys ed, and then quickly realized like, oh, like you can just like show up and get degrees and have no career plan. Like you can just do stuff.
English major right here.
Yeah. See, there you go. Like that to me, I wouldn't have any idea like what to do with that other than be an English teacher.
Yeah.
And I didn't have those conversations didn't happen around my dinner table. The conversations around my dinner table were very direct. You did a thing to get a job and make money. And some people got better jobs and more money than other people. So when I got there, it was such an eye opener of like, wow, like so many people doing so many different things. And then simultaneously to that, I also went to summer camp for the very first time when I was 17, and it was like, that was a whole other world that I didn't know existed either. And so I went to this camp because it was kind of like the stand-up thing. Like, I want to go to camp, can't afford to go to camp. I'm going to just do it to do it and just check it out. And so I did that. And then I worked in the business. My very first job was working in the business school at Queens, because after camp, as a summer student, I was doing some executive education programs around like lifestyle management and stuff because of my phys ed background. And that group said, you come work for us full time. We're launching a national executive MBA program out of this unit of the business school at Queens. And I was like, but I'm not a commerce. What? And Gordon Cassidy, who was the director, he's like, look, here's the deal. You don't worry about that other shit. Like you don't need to know that stuff. Here's what I like about you. And what I like about phys ed students, phys ed grads. One, you're really social. You're great in a crowd. You've been in change rooms and you get that culture of togetherness. You get that you're really social. Secondly, you know how to operate as a member of a team and contribute and win as a team. Thirdly, you're competitive. Like you're competitive. You understand what it takes to win and you have a will to win. And lastly, you went to Queen, so you're not an idiot. And anybody can learn this stuff. So no, don't worry about that other stuff. And so I was a program manager launching the National Executive MBA program, Queen's Business School. Then that was around that I graduated in 93. So now we're talking like the beginning of the web, right? 93. Like I had an email address in school, but did not know what it was. We got given a slip of paper and was like, you have this thing. I was like, I'm not a computer science major. What is this? So then as the internet started to take off, I was there in the business school and I put my hand up to go, I want to learn more about this thing. So I'm going to guide the first website for this group, the creation of the first website. And I worked with a web shop. That web shop was then opening an office in Toronto, partnering with an ad agency, and I went to work for them. So I left Queens, I went to work for Affinity Edge, who was partnered with Sharp Blackmore. They were the web division of Sharp Blackmore. 6 months later, the web company was not doing well, and the agency said, "Why don't you come over here? You ever want to work in advertising?" I was like, "No, I have no idea what that is." And he said, "You can be an account guy in advertising." Bill Sharp said, "This is all you need to know. Being an account guy in advertising is making a list and checking it off. That's it." Now, there's two caveats. One, you need to be smart enough to know what goes on the list. Secondly, you need to be ambitious enough to do it so that you can check it off. That's it. Go. We'll pay you whatever he was paying you. And then that was the start. I was like, oh, so I'm an account guy. Okay. So I got to the point where I was running the Intel business. And then my good friend Liz Faulkner, who's the founder of Breeze Communications, was an account person. And she came by and didn't really know her. And I was telling her a story, and it was a really funny story. And this was when I was like at the web shop. And she went to the two partners, Bill and Tom, and said, that guy in the back that works, like that guy who sits in the corner, he's really funny. And so then they had a client thing, and she came to me, she's like, "Do you want to do like a character thing for this client?" And I was like, "Okay, I'd never done that before." All right. And I did it. It was a big hit.
What was the character?
The character, that's such a great question. So it was Xerox was in the whole Xerox marketing team. And I created a character called Dr. Conundrum.
Oh, that's good.
But get
so
this,
specific.
This is what's crazy, because remember, this is 1997, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Conundrum had created a new invention. It was a cell phone that had a computer keyboard attached to it.
Oh my God.
This is long before BlackBerry.
This is 97? Oh,
97.
You guys invented the BlackBerry.
Yeah,
you, Ron Tite, have invented. Put that on your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like Al Gore inventing the internet.
Yeah.
Ron Tite invented the BlackBerry.
Yeah.
But it was this weird fiction. It was like, how crazy is that?
Yeah.
And I burst into the Bill Sharp was having, and Liz were having a meeting with all the Xerox clients. And I burst in saying, "Bill Sharp, I gave you this brief on this new invention and you've delivered nothing. And I want a marketing plan by the end of the day." And so then all these Xerox marketers had to create creative and media and everything for this new wacko invention, which was a cell phone with a keyboard attached to it.
Oh, wow.
And it was a big hit. And that's when I was like, oh, maybe I should kind of do comedy stuff. So my really good friend, Nick Kindler, was in a sketch troupe called Urban Myth. And I went to see them. And he said, "Wait till you see the host we have. This guy is he's famous." And I went to see this show and I said, I could do that. That's the famous guy? That host?
Do you remember who it was?
I will. Yes, I will say his name, but you have to also I'll back it up. So you probably don't know, but he's famous within comedy circles. There's a guy named Bruce Hunter, who is just an absolutely brilliant improviser. He was in a troupe called The Illustrated Man. He's a very successful actor. He was in Good Will Hunting. Like you would know him to see him. Ton of commercials. And it was like they were so honored that they were getting Bruce Hunter to host. And I don't mean to downplay and minimize his brilliance.
No, talk yourself up, Ron. Talk yourself up. Don't downplay.
Yeah. No, but Bruce he's an improviser. Like, he's not a stand-up. He's not a host. And so and I didn't realize that sometimes people go up and they work out stuff, like, whereas I was going expecting this to be his HBO special. Like, this is going to be his polished set. And of course it was. It was Bruce Hunter was on the Rivoli on a, Wednesday night. But in my mind, like, whatever he just did, I could do that.
That was the spark, which kind of sent you to where you
So
are
then
now,
I went to
basically.
Second City.
Yeah.
I went to Second City and did some in the training center. And
How was Second City? Was that a great experience for you?
it was an amazing experience.
Mm.
Yeah, I had Jerry Schaefer, who was a brilliant improviser as well. That's right, I'll turn it off. Jerry Schaefer was my instructor. I met some very good friends. Aurora Brown was in my very first class, who is in a Baroness Fun sketch show. She's one of the creators of that. Bruce Celery, who was an old friend from Queens, and I were in the same group. And then a group of us just decided, like, we got it to a point, and we're like, well, we don't want to be an improv troupe. And we each had like a specific goal. So we just decided, let's just go and do it on our own. Not for a show. Let's just develop stuff on our own and develop our own skills. We rented a space and we would just do stuff. They got 4 of us. No audience. It was just us. It was crazy. And it was me. It was Bruce Celery, who is now CEO of Credit Canada and on TV all the time talking about finance.
Oh, wow.
There was a guy named Sean who ended up becoming a writer, a great comedy writer, and Eileen, who was a PR person, and Aurora Brown joined us. So it was 5 of us. And then I was like, I want to be stand-up. Like, I want to do the stand-up thing. I don't want to be an improviser. And so I just went to my friend Steve Patterson and said, how do I become a stand-up? And he goes, you go to Yuck Yucks and you do an open mic night. You go on Monday night, you sign up and you do 5 minutes. And then if you're good enough, you come back the next week, the next week, the next week, the next week, the next week. And then maybe after 6 months, they'll ask you to do 5 minutes on a Tuesday.
Whoa.
That's how you start.
Brutal.
So I said, okay, I'm gonna go check it out. And I went down. I'm like, I'm not gonna commit to anything. I'm just gonna sit in the audience and check it out. And again, it was really arrogant, but I was like, this is bullshit. This is horrible. All these people are horrible. That guy lost a bet. That guy's drunk. Like, this is ridiculous. And so I said, I'm better than this. I know I'm already better than this, which is really cocky.
No, but you were, though. So it was accurate.
I just knew that I was more comfortable on stage than any of those people.
Yeah.
And so I said, what else can I do? And he goes, well, then you can get to know a producer of a live show and convince them to put you on at a bar, even though you've never done it. Maybe they'll give you 5 minutes. And then I said, well, why don't I just become a producer and make my own show? Just
jump the line.
I'm just jumping the queue.
Yeah.
So it's a really entrepreneurial approach to comedy, but my very first night of ever doing original material in stand-up, I headlined with a 45-minute set.
Oh my God. 45 minutes? Really?
I did 45.
That was your first full on? Wow.
I had done the Bill Cosby thing, which wasn't obviously my material. This was the first time. And I did no open mic nights with the material. I did nothing. The only thing I did was I sat Nick down and I said, let me walk you through some of this thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't get up on my feet or anything, but I was like, and Nick gave me his biggest piece of advice was, don't go down the road of assuming that it's happened. Like, don't ask people if something has happened to them. Just tell them what happened to you.
Okay.
And enough people will internalize that. And that's what makes it really powerful, is when they go, oh my God, me too. But when you put it out there to say, how many times has this happened to you? You're going to alienate some people and everything. Just tell us what happened to you. Just jump right into your story.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the best nights of my life, hands down, for a bunch of different reasons. It was a sold out house at the Second City at the Tim Sims Playhouse, 120 people. We gave money to charity. Urban Myth and some friends opened. Steve Patterson, who's now the host of The Debaters, hosted the show. And I did 45 minutes. And back to the previous conversation on the new 2, in speaking or in comedy, you don't launch 45 minutes of new material ever. You don't ever go to a crowd with 45 minutes of stuff that has never been tested before.
Well, that's what I
And
was surprised about because I've never heard of someone doing that. How did it go? Please continue, sir.
yeah, it rocked.
Oh, okay.
It was really fun. Now, was it a really friendly audience? Yeah, it was a totally really friendly audience. It was family and friends and colleagues and stuff.
Mhm.
And I worked on it for probably 6 months in my brain, in the shower, in my bedroom. Like I had got it to it was like I toured it inside my apartment. And so I did work out some of the kinks of it. And then yeah, like to get positive feedback on that much material was really, really cool. If you do that, guess what? You're a comedian.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a very large part of your mythology, your personal mythology. That was a real turning point in your life, it seems like.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was a couple of different things. I think it was acknowledging the skills that I had, those like natural things that kind of came naturally from my upbringing, but
Mhm.
I'd never actually tested them out like at that level. So it was like,
So you had
oh, you
always
don't have to.
suspected you could do it. You always suspected you had an inkling, but now you did it. You actually did it, though. So that must have changed something inside of you, it seems like. Give you some confidence, something.
It was, yeah, I think it was, you know, when Jerry Seinfeld talked about starting stand up, he said that you can't, he looked at like Jonathan Winters and he said, you can't look at Jonathan Winters and go, I can do that. Like you just can't. And for you younger people, you can Google Jonathan Winters.
Mhm.
Jonathan Winters, who played Robin Williams' son on Mork and Mindy, like the baby. He was this like adult baby. But Jonathan Winters was such a brilliant comedian. But you can't look at that and go, I can do that. But when Jerry Seinfeld saw Robert Klein, he's like, I can do that. And it's not just, again, to take away from, but it's like that delivery and stuff. Like I could do that, would come naturally to me. So I always had this inkling of like, I could do a Bill Cosby thing. I can't be Robin Williams. I'm not crazy and weird in that way, but I can tell stories. But there was still, I think, something because I grew up quite poor. I think it was like, and I didn't grow up with that in my family. I always felt like that was a separate, like I didn't know who that person was that did that. You know, like who, what do you mean you play the tuba? Who the hell plays the tuba? How do you ever, like, I don't know anybody that plays the tuba. I don't, like, what happens in your life that you end up on stage playing the tuba in a jazz band? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, in screenwriting, this is the moment they call refusing the call. Like you have a call to adventure, but you're doubting
Sorry, what is
yourself.
it? I don't know this term. What
Oh,
is it?
in screenwriting, there's a structure,
Yeah.
and the hero is going through his mundane life. Like, not to say your life was mundane, but
No,
you're
it
going through
100% was.
you're going through your regular life, and then something happens, and it's a call to adventure. Something shakes up your life, and you're prompted to go adventure, to go chase the golden fleece or whatever. You
Yeah.
have to break out of your what you're familiar with. And the initial response is to refuse it because, like you said, you're thinking, this is not me. I'm not this type of person. I don't go on adventures. I do this because this is what I was raised to do.
Right.
But that's what it seems psychologically you were going through at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. That is
The
exactly
refusal
it.
of the call. But then you did answer the call. So please continue.
Yeah. Yeah. I answered the call and it was, yeah, because like I wasn't the class clown, right? Like that wasn't what I pictured myself as. But again, it was never about, I want to become Jerry Seinfeld. Like it was never it. It was, I want to get up on stage and see and explore how one does that. How does one write material and deliver material? And how do you make it better and all that? But that entrepreneurial approach, I didn't see it as being an entrepreneurial approach. But now in retrospect, it was like, oh, that's completely defined my career of like, I'm not doing it the way other people do it.
Mhm.
And I don't care about the rules that are put in place. And it's not that I'm rebellious because I'm not that guy.
No, you're just problem solving.
Yeah, I
You
just
know?
don't care. I just want to do it the way I want to do it.
Mhm.
So anyhow, so once that started happening, then it was like, oh my God, I really am great. I can write, I can deliver, I can do all these things. That's cool. I didn't think that I had that in me.
Oh, that must have been a cool moment though, when you finally realized it. You really thought, oh, I can do this. I can really do this. I
Yeah,
don't have to be in Hollywood or in New York or something like that.
exactly. That's exactly it. It's like I can just do what I want to do. And then the next stage of that development was because now you get all these, once you've done the thing, now you're like, oh, now you got to do the stand-up thing, and you got to do open mic nights, and you got to, like, you become part of that culture. And again, I was like, I don't really want, like, I don't want to do yuck yucks. And so I hung out in the Second City world. And then I wrote this play called The Canadian Baby Bonus. And I was working with a guy, a director, and who had said, if you want to take stand-up and put it into play form, you have to expose the emotional underbelly of what inspired the comedy. Because comedy is, in those days, this is like obviously Mike Birbiglia and all this new wave of kind of
comedy is very sad now. A lot of sad comics.
Yeah. And so it was like, you need to expose the emotional underbelly of the comedy. And I was like, oh my God, how do I do that? So I sat down and wrote this play. And that was the next stage where I was like, oh, right, I don't want to be a stand-up. I don't need to do, or it's not that I don't need to do the traditional stand-up thing. I don't get a ton of fulfillment out of that. I did, but so I wrote this play, and I was performing it at the Edmonton Fringe Festival. And then the initial comedy was really about growing up poor, right? Hand-me-down clothes and blah, blah, all this kind of stuff. And then it was like, what was the emotional underbelly of all that? What it was a massive acknowledgement of the incredible job my mom did. And that's what I discovered, was like, oh, that's why I see the humor in it, but it's positive humor. It's not negative, bitter humor. It's because I know that my mom did like such an incredible job with 4 kids being physically disabled on social assistance. Like, it was crazy. And so when I exposed that emotional underbelly, that was something else. I was like, oh, like, you don't need to end on a punchline. It's actually way more fulfilling, the stuff that follows the punchline. Mm-hmm. In that moment of silence where you can take them anywhere. And I had this experience on stage in Edmonton where one of the poignant moments is I'd say, so, hey, be careful. And it's a callback to something earlier in the play. And the room is dead silent at that point. And I was in Edmonton, sold out house, tight, intimate theater. And I said, so, hey, and I hear this woman in the front row go, and that blew me away more than probably any emotional reaction I've ever had in my life, where that one little showed that I had taken her on this journey, and I had her in the palm of my hand, and she was waiting, kind of like, what's next, what's next, what's next? And in that moment, she figured out what was next before I said what was next. She knew the next line was going to be.
You walked her down the road, and then she knew it was around the corner.
She knew it was around the corner, and it was this weird emotional. And I could have, at that moment, then gone to a joke and made her laugh. I could have gone deeper and made her cry. I could have made her think, like, and so that to me is when I truly understood the power and the role of comedy. And I thought that so many people were doing a disservice to the craft, that they were stopping at the punchline, and that it was way more fulfilling in the thing that followed the punchline. And what is that thing? Is it an emotional thing? Is it a direction thing? And that is speaking. That goes into, I'm going to make you laugh, but it's with reason. I'm here to actually get you to do something or tell you something. And I'm going to set you up with the laughter, but we're not here for the laughter. We're here for the thing that follows the laughter. It's way more fulfilling to me.
The comedy is like the sugar, and then there's medicine underneath it. And you just...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, that's just for me. I'm not saying that all comedy needs to be like that. I sometimes love pee pee poo poo caca, like
we all do.
It's a traditional Adam Sandler kind of, like what? There's nothing funnier than a fart. There's nothing funnier than a fart.
Falling. Nothing. I love seeing fall down. People falling down. Funniest thing in the world. And the longer it takes them to fall down, the funnier it is.
You hear the drums in the back.
Right? And the problem is when it actually happens, you can't laugh. It's rude to laugh. So you kind of have to, sorry, continue.
But that's it. And so I'm not saying that everything needs to be in that zone.
Mhm.
But for me, that discovery was, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh, wow. I have noticed that though, when you're making any kind of art, when people react with the noise, it's always good.
Yeah.
If the
Yeah.
if the well, I will say the caveat, if the noise is, huh, that's not good. But if the noise is like you said, or the noise is, oh, that's good, you know. But like the noise they make initially tells you everything that you need to know
Yeah.
of what you did. So
That's a great line. That's a great perspective. I think even the is like, where's he going with this? Like it's a good
right,
indicator. Like they're
right,
following you.
yeah. But it has to be followed up with the oh, so it
Yeah,
has
yeah,
to,
yeah,
another
yeah.
noise has to follow it. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
So yeah,
exactly.
yeah. That's incredible, man. That's just like I got a little emotional there when you told that story. So it's like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But man, okay. So you're at the Fringe Fest. You had this, I would say, spiritual moment, I think, in your life
I
with that.
Sure. I've never characterized it as that, but I think that's totally justified in calling it that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Wow.
then just became about how do I pursue that feeling. It wasn't media dependent. It wasn't you know format perspective or modality. It was
It was an
just
expression as a play, but you could express that other ways, you felt
yeah,
like. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I also know that I think it makes you a better speaker when you can be vulnerable and show a real side of who you are. I think, and this is where this idea of the metrics and social come in. I did a post on International Women's Day about my mom, and it was, hey, like, hey, my mom, grew up with spina bifida. She was physically disabled. Her school was called the Montreal School for Crippled Children.
Ooh,
Yeah,
tough name.
horrible
Tough
name,
name.
horrible.
Oof.
Right? Like,
People were brutal back then.
it would just roll off her tongue like, well, I remember the School
Oh,
for Crippled Children. We'd be like, oh, God,
God.
don't say that.
Jeez.
Um, but she graduated in grade 10 because that's when you're physically disabled. That's when you graduated. There was nothing after that for you.
Mhm.
And she was left alone with 4 children, social assistance, blah, 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 blah. And I just said, on this day, we often celebrate women who are titans of industry, women who are killing it, women who are climbing the ladder, who are righting the wrongs, and as we should. That is long overdue. But without people like my mom who never were given a chance, like just because they didn't speak up didn't mean they didn't have a voice, and just because they accepted their fate, that doesn't mean they deserved it. And that, let's not forget those women on International Women's Day. So anyhow, I know that I can write a post like that and be really open and vulnerable, and the views are going to go through the roof. It's just going to go through the roof. It's going to be shared more than an article that I write about, I reference from Harvard Business Review. Guaranteed. Now, the metrics chasers would say, well, then you need to do more stuff like that and just keep getting all those views. And I say, no, I don't. Because the reason I don't want to just be the person that shares this personal, vulnerable stuff, I'm way more complicated than that. And there are way more things that I find interesting and that I think, by the way, are way more important. I think articles from HBR or CEO Network or like whatever, McKinsey, I think those are way more important to business. And you can sprinkle in some of that personal stuff. But just because the metrics say you got a lot of views on something, that doesn't mean you should rinse and repeat on that, because then you're that guy.
You are. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. Whew.
So anyhow, so I go through all that.
Mhm.
I, am now creative at an agency. I start to speak, and that starts to grow. And so there's this weird thing where speaking starts to grow, and I'm going to my bosses and saying, don't give me a raise, give me more time off. Don't give me a raise, give me more time off. And I'm making more money in my time off than you can give me as a raise. It's great for both of us. And I knew that at some point I'm gonna have to decide. And so that was all going on. At the same time, advertising as a whole was drastically changing, and that the rise of digital. And I had at this point been the creative director who had been written, whack of TV spots and for Kraft and Volvo and people like that. And I saw this advertising world changing. And quite frankly, at the same time, my two mentors, Bill Sharp and Tom Blackmore, were also changing because they had sold the business to Havas. And so the dynamics of the agency were changing. And some people had left and it was another generation. So like all these things together was like, I'm going to go. I'm just going
I
to
can
go.
see the writing on the wall. It's going to get out of here before I'm asked to leave,
Yeah. And and those guys are still two of my favorite people in the world and have some great friendships from those days. But I was getting a bit cranky and I thought that's not who I am. And I respect those guys too much to be that guy.
Oh, by the way, lessons to the kids out there. When you see that jaded lifer at your agency or whatever business you're working on, try not to take him too seriously because the man's jaded anyway.
Exactly. And you don't want to be that guy.
You don't want to be that guy.
You don't want to be that guy. That's not fun.
Every company has them,
Yep.
So, yeah.
Totally. And so I just said, I'm going to go. And I didn't know. And I just wanted to control my own destiny. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to figure out what I wanted to figure out. I wanted to explore speaking in a way. And I was really lucky that speaking had got to the point that I could just live on that. That like, I was single. I was like, I can just live on this. I was doing 20 gigs a year or something.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds awesome. Being single, doing 20 gigs a year. Oh,
yeah. And go like,
that's
okay,
the 90s. Was this back in the 90s or in the 2s or in the O's?
This is in 2011.
Oh, in the teens. Okay.
Yeah. So
still
it was
great. Still great. Yeah.
I had just started. So I go, okay, I'm going to start an agency. Don't know what that is, and again, I'd never had any thoughts that I would start an agency. No idea.
Never?
No.
Come on. It never crossed your mind?
Nope.
Okay. All right.
No, it hadn't because I just love Bill and Tom. And I just like, why would I start something else? These guys are amazing. Well, I'm just love working here. And again, it's kind of like, that's not me. I'm not that guy. I'm not that entrepreneur. Didn't grow up with that.
Okay. It seems like your life has been kind of run on epiphanies. You've had these epiphanies along the way, which have kind of changed the direction of your life as you've gone on.
A little bit, I think, but even the agency, it wasn't like this, in the moment, like in retrospect, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But in the moment, it was like, oh, I think I can live on speaking. So I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to go and start to explore stuff. And I didn't know anything else. I'm like, I guess it's called an agency. And I don't know what that is. And so I need something unique and different because I don't want to be the guy that's doing TV spots. So what is that? Where's everything going? And so I just spent a year going like, I don't know, like, what's the strategy? If I was to have a pitch, what would it be? And I was really lucky that because I had the speaking, I didn't need to take on clients that I didn't want to do, shitty work for. I was just like, I'm just going to.
That's a good position to be in to start an agency where you don't really need to take on clients. You can just kind of cultivate it as you go along slowly. So
yeah. And so I did that. And then, it was called the Tite Group at that point because I didn't care about the name. And it was more about like, how do I stay in business? I gave myself 6 months. And if it's not viable in 6 months, then I'll just focus on speaking. That's cool. But I also knew that you can't sell speaking. You can't ever sell your
business of speaking.
Yeah, you can't sell it.
No, you can't sell it.
And speaking, I thought would be a good biz dev thing. So like, wouldn't it be great if I could own a piece of the thing that I helped give the lead to?
Yeah.
And so anyhow, so I did that and then quickly realized as things start to grow and I worked on the strategy and the approach and everything. And you quickly realize like, oh, that I'm not as a creative director, you think, oh, I'm just going to do this. And you're like, maybe. And again, it's one of those, like, like when I did stand up and then you do it for a little bit and you're like, oh, but I'm actually better at this other thing than pure stand up, even though that seemed to go really well. So it's the same thing in the agency where I was like, oh, like I'm actually maybe better at like biz dev and strategy than I am as a traditional creative director. Like maybe that's where my brain goes. And I'm not there's this pressure when you start your own shop that you should be the CEO and you should have all the answers. I'm not a great CEO. I'm a horrible CEO. I'm way too distracted. I'm all over the place. I'm not processed enough. So I gave up equity to bring in partners who could help me out. And then we did a rebrand that like once realized what we did really well, church and state. It was that, as you kind of mentioned, it's the kind of the unification of advertising and content together, be it socially distributed or everything from TV shows and documentaries all the way through to, YouTube short. And so now we're 25 people. We own a stake in a production company. We're Walmart and Google are our biggest clients. We also work with Centennial. We work with Worth. We work with Meridian Credit Union. And we do a lot of different stuff. And there's been some books and stuff. I'm just going to shut my door. Sorry.
Whew, that was a roller coaster, Ron. Jeez. That was something else. Man, what a story.
I'm sure you're going to edit that. There's a lot of like...
oh, well, we'll see. I think a lot of it was probably going to stay, but man, that was incredible. Let's just dive into the church and state. Let's dive into the advertising industry in general.
Sure.
So your thought now, because I think a lot about business and advertising, and you stop me if you tell me if you think I'm wrong, but it seems like the advertising industry is at a point now where we've reached kind of perfect competition, where it's a lot of players. They all do the same or similar things. And so it's so competitive that it seems like competitive forces have we've gotten to the point now where it seems like no one can really find a competitive advantage, which is why you've got 5 companies that own 90% of the industry. What are your thoughts? How do you
create? You mean agencies or marketers, clients?
Agencies, specifically agencies.
Yeah.
But what I liked about your agency was that you are trying to figure out how to create a competitive advantage with the content side, combining that with traditional agency. I've always, I heard someone say one time, I forget what the gentleman's name was, but he said there's service-based companies and asset-based companies. A service-based company like an agency, you can be in business for 100 years. And then one day you lose your top 3 clients, doors are closed, you have nothing. You have no assets. An asset-based company is sort of like a record label or a real estate company. As you're going along and doing business, you're collecting assets. You have a store of assets. I think that might be where agencies could be headed. But what are your thoughts on creating a competitive advantage in this current kind of monopolistic competitive landscape right now, where advertising is, I feel like? So
yeah, I think it all has to come from the problem first. And I think you have to have an indication of what, as an example, we've had a couple of people who asked to buy us.
Which one?
Not to holdcos, but weird random plays, right? And we've had a consultancy who tried to buy us, and
private
we're
equity?
Always, what's that?
Private equity?
In a way, yes.
Okay, because they usually don't buy advertising agencies, but sorry, continue.
Well, but they do if it's a financial roll up, right? So this is where they go, we're going to take, and this is one way to do it, right? We're going to take a whole bunch of agencies, we're going to buy a bunch of agencies, we're going to eliminate 20 points off the top, bring them together, go from 0 to 50 million, sell it at 9 times EBITDA, blah, blah, blah.
Boom.
And when that happens, the question I ask is, what's the portfolio strategy? Tell me what you're building that solves the problem that CMOs need.
Other than cutting costs.
That CMOs have.
Yeah.
Like, what problem are you solving with this approach? And if you're just doing a financial roll-up, I'm not saying that's really a viable business or not, but of course it is, but I want no part in that. I think that's soulless. And I don't know where that goes. True competitive advantage comes from being able to identify a problem that the market has, aligning your services and skill set to solve those problems in an operationally efficient way. And so it's ridiculous to say, you've seen production companies who are like, we've got everything under one roof. We've got the sound people, the thing, that, right? It very rarely works. Why? Because no one was asking for it. No one's going, man, I wish my production, they didn't give a shit. They didn't care. It was all back-end accounting to the end client. They had $400,000 to spend on one spot, and somebody else took care of all the companies. They did not care about there being one throat to choke. So that it doesn't work because no one's asking for it. So where are things going in marketing? That's the first question to ask. Now, I initially thought that where things were going was the unification of content and advertising. And that is still something that's very relevant. That it doesn't
church
matter.
Church and state.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. No longer the separation of church and state, the unification of church and state. So on one level, that's it, but that's a tactical thing. where I think the biggest move is there's two things. One, there's still nothing more powerful than a consumer saying, I've never seen that before. Never seen that before. And AI and automated tools and all that, any data-filled benchmarks does not address that. Nothing. When you're predicting performance, you're predicting it based on behaviors that have preceded that tactic. And if nothing has preceded that tactic, and no one has ever done that before, you have nothing to base it on. And I think there's still a lot of power in that. So that's one. Secondly, that there is, I can't use the phrase nothing more powerful. There's almost nothing more powerful than a consumer being given a promise and showing up and having a consumer interaction with a frontline employee, with an app, with a product, whatever, that fulfills what they were, that delivers on the promise. And so this is where the experience kind of CX comes in, right? And so what do we have? We have a bunch of agencies who are consulting, coming up with messaging wherever they distribute it and saying, this is what this brand is about. And we have frontline employees who aren't delivering on it. Well, that's a massive, what we call an integrity gap. And that ad is going to fail because the inside person didn't buy into it, or they had no idea that it was coming, or they didn't align with those beliefs. And so now, when you talk church and state, yes, it's advertising and content. I think it's also marketing and HR. Two disciplines that have never been together now need to come more closely aligned. We need to sell it inside the organization before we sell it outside. We need to get people to change behaviors in their interactions and what they do on a daily basis for that brand truly to come to life, for those beliefs truly to come to life. Now, if you believe that and no one is solving that, now you have competitive advantage. And that is, I think, our new competitive advantage, which is when we go in and say, CX doesn't happen without EX, without employee experience. So our first phase of doing this work for you is, how do we launch this inside the organization before we launch it outside?
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no one's doing it.
Yeah.
There are some inside only people and there's a ton of outside only people, but there's nobody that's doing both. And then once you make that leap, well, then you can go training and development, and you can go courses and, all those sorts of things. So we just won something that we were hired by the CHRO, not the CMO.
Wow. Yeah, it does make sense. And it's one of those things, culture in an organization and HR, they're always overlooked by the bean counters.
Yep.
It's never even a thought, but it means so much. It's one of those black boxes that no one wants to get into because it's hard to control, I suppose. But yeah, that's
exactly.
a really interesting approach.
Yeah. So I think that's how you create competitive difference.
Oh, wow. That's really good. Can I pitch you what I think?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So yeah, so I watch, I observe, and I investigate different business models. And I think that in the past, the industry of advertising agencies, there was more of a barrier to entry. There was a lot of technical things involved, which you could only learn by being inside an agency and kind of working for years. Now it seems like those barriers have come down with digital, and people can kind of learn things on their own. So the barriers to entry have gone up. And what I think with not just advertising agencies, but any mature industry or mature company, is that companies themselves seem like they are natural evolution of nature, basically.
Okay.
Things that are alive in an ecosystem, they compete against each other for resources. The best ones move on. The ones who are not adapted become extinct, basically. And anything that's alive should have kids when it's mature. And now you see Liquid Death, which was started by an ad guy.
Yeah.
It's a pure branding play. That's all. It's water.
Yeah.
But it's huge because of the branding. Advertising agencies now, there's never been a better time than now to create a brand, because distribution is just out there with social media.
Yeah.
So we have all these advertising agencies. The competition is so high. They specialize in branding. They should create their own brands, I think. And now you have an asset. You have brands.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think it's been like we would define it as like there's been two things. We say it is low cost of production. So not only like you can produce a TV show with ridiculously low levels of low cost of production, but you can also produce a product with ridiculously low levels of low cost of production. So you got low cost of production, and then you have instantaneous and global distribution.
Right.
Through the internet. And so you don't
Social
need to be
media.
a TV network, and like you can just create your own show and
Yeah.
distribute it globally across the world. And because of drop shipping and other stuff, you can do the same thing with products like fulfillment. So I don't disagree with you. The only part is that then it becomes a side hustle, right? Like it becomes a side hustle. And there's nothing in an agency's business model that is optimized to do that. You don't have roles to do that. You can do the marketing for it, but in terms of like who owns the like who's talking to the factory and who, like all that kind of stuff, you don't have those roles in an agency. Then you got to hire those people because you got this one SKU. Opposed to, we're going to own 10% of something, we're going to do the branding, but we're going to kick it over to somebody else who's going to do it. Because or we're going to stop being an agency and we're just going to do this thing. It gets really, really difficult. Now, you can combine the two thoughts. The two of us can be right. Where it's like, well, what if an agency then created a brand around a piece of content? And that's what we tried to do with the Coup, which was if we create this thing called the Coup and we did it within partnership with Rogers Frequency, can we now have something that is its own thing that we brand it in its own unique way, but it serves our greater interests as an agency, that we can optimize it and we can use it to sell what we know, help sell what we also sell.
Branded
so now we've
content.
got a portfolio strategy and it's branded content. They did the exact same thing with the book. We published Think, Do, Say. And again, it's because that will help us. What people don't realize, we published a book before Think, Do, Say. We published a book with my friends, Pat Kelly and Chris Kelly and Peter Oldring, who created a show on CBC Radio called This Is That. And we created This Is That Travel Guide to Canada. We were the publisher of this comedy book. And we went through it because I wanted to see if I could publish a book and make it work. And it worked. At one point, it was the highest selling humor book in the country for like 14 weeks in a row. It won an International Independent Book Publishing Award. It was amazing. It did great. But we got nothing out of it. Absolutely nothing other than going through this exercise. It was a complete one-off. So I said, okay, we're never going to do that again because you can't, it's not like we're making millions off this book. And we're just not built to be a publisher on an ongoing basis unless the book helps us in the other things that we do. So when I wrote Think, Do, Say and we published Think, Do, Say became our complete operating system in the agency. We didn't need to make money on the book because it helped us in other ways.
Right, because of the framework of thinking that it provided.
Exactly.
Right. That's pretty good.
And we go into a new business pitch. Like we had a big pitch and the CEO said, I read your book. I loved your book. That changes the dynamic of the room.
That's a competitive advantage. If they know about you before you step in the room like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if they said, I read This Is That Travel Guide to Canada, it's really funny. It would not help us one bit.
No.
In the pitch.
Yeah.
And I think Rethink tried to do this. Rethink
they had a beer brand when they first
it was a beer brand. It was out of their Vancouver office. They had a beer brand to probably 10 years ago. Yeah,
that was actually, now beer brands are all over the place. These microbrews are popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
So, do they still have it? I don't even know.
I don't think so, but they're smart guys. They're smart folks. They're it wouldn't surprise me if they started going down that road again, but they
got a lot on their plate right now.
Okay, they're killing it right now. Yeah,
they're a lot on their plate. I see these influencers, like Prime Energy, Mr. Beast has some chocolate bars and burgers, and I'm thinking, God damn, advertisers should be doing this. If these influencers, a lot of them aren't the smartest people who are killing it by creating products and brands. I'm just thinking someone's got to step up and do this in the advertising world, but maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I don't.
Yeah, but what they're doing really well is And closer to home, David Rocco is doing this, right? On a
Oh,
different
I'm
David's a
not
friend.
familiar with David Rocco.
It's a David Rocco. He produces a show called Dolce Italia. So he's had
Mhm.
cooking shows for, I think, 15, 20 years.
Okay.
Dolce Italia, Dolce India, big chef. And he's done really, really well. And in the food space, not even a trained chef. He's just Italian. And
That's all you need sometimes.
that's all you need. But he's great on camera. Like he's a great guy. He's a really, really great guy. And so he decides, like, I've built up this TV show of this trust and expertise in Italian cooking. I don't have my own sauces. Like what? Like that's great. Like it's ridiculous. I don't have my own sauces. So he now has a restaurant in Yorkville. He has his own line of pastas and sauces. And he's not doing it. He went TV first, but he built the David Rocco brand. And so everything else is just a product extension
It's a
of that.
flywheel around David
Yeah.
Rocco. Yeah.
Mr. Beast built the brand already. It wasn't the burger. It was Mr. Beast, the content piece.
But Liquid Death,
That's
though, Liquid Death came out of nowhere. It was pure branding. So I
yes,
think
Liquid Death is a great example of that. But when you talk about influencers, they are building a personal brand, a
Mhm.
content brand, and then once they get that to a certain level, then they go, all right, we're just going to do some product extensions here. This
Yeah.
is the Mr. Beast brand as a burger. This is the Mr. Beast brand as a drink.
So it's a little bit different, but I don't know.
But you're
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
in that if you're church and state, we could conceivably create a product that if we have this thing called the CXEX gap. What's the gap between where your customer experience wants to be and where your employee experience is?
Mhm.
If we developed a tool and around that specific IP and sold that tool as a piece of software, well, that's where it's a brand extension of what we fundamentally believe into
Mhm.
app product form.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something you could, and that would be a durable asset. It's something that you could keep or spin off as something
Yeah.
else. But now you're in the asset business instead of the service business, which
Yeah.
I think is a more stable and robust type of business. I'm just trying to figure out how to get advertising into the asset business as opposed to the service business. But it's a tough business problem, I think.
Well, the problem is it
But
could be IP, and we would say that our IP is really unique in the space of using
mhm.
Think to Say, and it gets way
That's
more
an IP.
granular.
Yeah, that's durable. That's
Yeah,
gonna be around for 100 years,
yeah.
So yeah.
Whereas agencies will sometimes go, "It's love marks, trademark." It's a who was that?
What?
Tite? No, BBDO or somebody had love marks. I don't. Maybe it was Shy
Oh,
Dave. I don't
I
know,
missed that.
but
Yeah.
it's like they go the branded kind of thing first, opposed to
Okay.
it being like a really specific IP. It's more of an
Yeah.
interesting brand.
Yeah. Some might even say Coca-Cola is strictly a branding organization because they outsource all of their actual physical bottling and distribution to third-party
The
distributors and
bottlers.
bottlers,
Yeah,
and
totally.
they're mostly in a branding business. They're keeping the brand alive, so
Yep. Yeah, they've got a unique recipe that they partner with other people to execute. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's just yeah, it's just interesting, but,
It's the Mr. Beast burger approach, right? He has no
yeah.
restaurants. He's just teaching people how to use his recipe.
Oh, genius. That kid is so smart. My god. He's
Yeah,
good. Yeah. He was ahead of the curve of everybody. I think people might get some beast fatigue eventually because those things tend to kind of, they have an arc, they have a half-life, so we'll
sure.
see how it goes. We'll see how
If
it
he's
goes.
smart, he'll invest his money into long-term plays that aren't maybe as dependent on the Beast brand.
Mhm.
He'll capitalize on what he has right now and for long-term growth.
Yeah. It's just so interesting because, like, a lot of the rules are gone now, so the world is kind of shaking itself out. We're not really sure how this is gonna shake out, so
Yeah,
the
like
early
like an
yeah.
interesting example for Mr. Beast is Gary V.
Oh, yeah,
So,
first mover advantage for sure. Yeah, he got in there quick.
but he got in there quick, but that, him as a personality, that certainly would have a peak and valley. But what did
Yep,
he do? He started a speakers bureau. He's got VaynerMedia,
yep,
which is now just launched in Canada.
yep.
So as to your point, he's building these assets that I would still say are a little bit dependent on the Vayner name. And you want to get it to the point that it's on its name, regardless of the name, that it's not dependent on Gary's personality to drive. It's got to be successful on its own. It just so happens to be called VaynerMedia, but on its own, it's a great shop.
Right. Similar to Shark, Blackboard, these other places.
Yeah.
They have names attached who built it, but you should be able to walk away and sell it at a certain point. So it shouldn't be
And so
that.
this is why I changed from the Tite Group. Do you know Neil Pesrisha, who wrote
No, but he
the Book
sounds
of
magical.
Awesome?
It's a great name. Niels.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He wrote the Book of Awesome, as well as a number of other books. And so Neil's a friend, and we were going somewhere, and but I know Neil from the speaking world, and he was coming by the office. I said, "Why don't you come by the office and we'll leave from here?" I think we were going to a gig or something, and we were called the Tite Group. And he shows up and he goes, "Oh, it's a fucking thing." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "The Tite Group." I'm like, "Yeah, there's like 20 people here. Like, we have clients." And he's like, "Oh, I thought the Tite Group, it was just you
You in your basement doing your
in
own
in like some shared workspace," because that's what most speakers do.
Mhm.
Is it's a whatever their name is incorporated.
Right.
And he goes, "You're doing yourself a disservice."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because I always thought, "Oh, I need to connect Ron Tite, the speaker, to the thing that I own."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I called it the Tite Group. And he's like, "No, no, 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 no. You're doing yourself a disservice. You need to call it something else, both as a speaker and as the agency. It has to live beyond you."
Yeah.
And that's when we called it Church and State.
That
was the beginning of it.
Yeah, it sounds more impressive when it's a different name as well for some reason. So yeah, I do think he's right. Neil Pasricha. Good observations, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Gary Vee thing, though, I watched the internet. I watched social media very closely, and Gary Vee, I think most of his success came from being the first business guy to really attack social media. But now you've got tons of business, like actual legitimate. I mean, the All In. Have you listened to the All In podcast?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, it's for Silicon Valley billionaire guys. Like what one guy started was in on eBay. Sorry, not eBay. PayPal with Peter Thiel, and then he eventually became a billionaire by creating this social network called Yammer, which was a social network for
They sold
corporations.
to Microsoft. And,
And then, but all four of these guys are like legitimate Silicon Valley billionaires, and now they're doing content.
Right.
So guys like Gary Vee was a owner of a liquor store, but the reason he became big was because he was in there first.
I don't know that he was first.
You don't think so?
No.
Business wise, the internet, social media business guy, the hustle guy.
No, there were a ton of people before Gary.
Really?
Chris Brogan was before Gary. Mitch Joel was before Gary. There's a ton of Amber Mack was before Gary.
Mm-hmm.
All those people were before Gary. There's a ton of social media who were before Gary. All the early Twitter people.
So you think it was just his personality that was his advantage?
Yeah, I think Gary, and I've done a bunch of gigs with Gary. I've met him a bunch of times, but he won't remember me. But
could you feel the energy coming off this man when you were?
Yeah, the first time I did a gig with him, there were two things that really impressed me. One is he showed up, he went to a green room and he worked. There was no like, look at me, I'm Gary Vee. He worked his ass off.
He better be, because that's what he preaches. Work all the time. So he better be working.
Work.
Yeah.
And until someone came and tapped him and said, "You're on in 2 minutes." He's like, "Okay, give me the mic. There we go. Out on stage." Blah, 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 blah. I still remember the first time. It was the Art of Marketing. And he said in Calgary, you're all marketers. Who's not on Twitter? Put up your hand. And he said, if you're not on Twitter and you're a marketer, you're a fucking moron. So he was the first person to do that. He was the first person to combine a massive personality with a no holds barred approach, with direct and passionate arguments. So he packaged it up. The brand of Gary Vee was a really original kind of thing. And then where it really took hold was when he started to invest in stuff. And then it became, oh, fuck, this guy knows what he's talking. Like he had the credibility. He had the wine library. He was doing content, and it really kind of helped his business. Whereas a lot of people were talking about it, and I'd say Mitch Joel was kind of, and Mitch, full disclosures, are one of my best friends, but he was kind of out talking, but also applying a twist homage. So he was doing it from an agency perspective. But most of the speakers were out there who were speaking about it and just using the tools. They were just like, they were big on Twitter, but weren't like, they didn't have a massive corporate success behind them. Their business was the speaking business.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's what there's an element of me that does that, right?
Yeah.
And they do, and like my good friend Scott Stratton is that, right? Massive on Twitter, has a really sound understanding of all this stuff, but it doesn't want a business, doesn't want to be a consultant, doesn't want any of that shit. He just wants to speak, and he's really, really good at it. Gary was the one that was like, I'm going to do all these other things, and you're going to buy into those other things. To the point that at one point, I remember he took a break from speaking, and he said, I'm not doing it because and my grandfather would kill me if he knew that I was turning down $40,000 for an hour. But I think there's more growth in these other things. And then I think he just found a way to operationalize the personality and all those other things to now both do the speaking, be omnipresent in content by diving in on stuff and having these other avenues. The potential is that it never, and I say this with all due respect to him, because he's killing it, right? And VaynerMedia is a huge agency.
Yep.
They're never going to be the agency that they're not going to topple Rethink.
No.
They're just not.
No.
And Mitch and I were texting the other night. Mitch kind of said he doesn't have to, and he's right. Like he doesn't have to be number one in a market. And that was Mitch's great insight. And he's like, yeah, he can be number 10 in every market and still build the hold co and feed the Gary V thing.
Yeah, well, the thing with Gary is I don't think it's called VaynerMedia, but I think Gary himself is just he's a businessman, and he's looking for edge. He's looking for somewhere where he can get an edge, and he found social media, I think. Forgive me if I'm mistaken, but it seems like he saw social media as his edge as a businessman.
Yeah.
And then he thought, okay, what is the logical business extension of what I'm doing? First things first, media, VaynerMedia, advertising, social media agency. And then from there, he has free cash flow. He's like, okay, what's the best use of free cash flow? I'm going to invest in startups, has the highest upside. And I'm a gambler, so why not? If I can be in on the early stages of some of these really hot. So the deployment of capital was the second phase of that, I think. I think the agency created cash flow. He took the cash flow and started deploying it. Now, it'd be interesting to see what he does next, actually. But I do think he's not a media guy, he's social media. He's a business guy who's adapting to the changing environment and looking for opportunities. That's what I think, which he's done incredibly well, though. So yeah, he's an impressive guy.
Yeah, it's a really unique model. I mean, where you end up, I think, where you mature as a business person is you're like, that's an impressive model. I have no desire for that model. Don't want that model. Yeah. That's not me. That's not my strength. I know what I do really well. There's no that drives me, what I love to do. And it's not a lot of that. It's kind of like, hey, there are people who are brilliant investment bankers. They're amazing investment. They make a ton of money. They're really happy. Not me.
Not me either. Nope. We have to address the elephant in the room, Ron. We need to talk about AI. Every day I'm seeing something that was made with AI, and every day it blows my mind.
Yeah, it's cool.
I don't know what's going to happen. Do you have any idea what's going to happen? Because I really have no idea what's going to happen.
I think we'll use AI to operationalize and streamline process.
What about the creativity that's coming out, though? The Mid-Journey things and some of the images that they're spinning up are just amazing. Dead eyes, but amazing.
Yeah. I think we're using it, right? To, like, if we have an idea, like, let's just go to AI to generate the mock-up for that, right? Like where you'd used to do linears and stuff. Like, let's just create the mock-up. And so we're doing that now. But again, back to that point, there's nothing more powerful, and I've never seen that before. And I don't remember the woman's name who said this, but It's not me, but the line is great, which is only humans can do what no human has done before.
Whoa, that's a heavy line.
It's a great line, and it's true. And
Yeah.
so, and I'm not a denier, and I'm like, yeah, of course, it's really cool. We should explore this space, and it's
Do,
gonna
do you see it as an existential threat to the entire industry, or
no,
do you think it's just going to be another tool? Just
it's a tool.
okay.
I think it's a really cool tool, and I think it will streamline. And there will some people who will only exclusively use it, and just like everybody said, agencies are dead because, or media companies are dead because clients don't have to pay anybody to get organic content in front of users on Facebook. And then Facebook said, we got an algorithm, we're going to change it, we're going to charge it.
Yeah.
That the idea of free is this history says that does not work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that someone's going to make money somewhere along the way. And so it might recalibrate the industry, it might adapt people, but yeah, I'm looking forward to diving in more and kind of seeing how I can spend more time on good shit and less time on bad shit.
I think we should all try to do that. Strive for those things in our life.
Yeah.
Just try to
Exactly.
remove the bad shit and bring in good shit. I think that's a great way to live.
Yeah.
Can we just we're going to wrap up in a little bit here. So you've been discussing your career as a speaker. Can you kind of give us some insights into the speaking game, and not to disclose your own speaking fees, but
No,
can you
I
even
don't
give
care.
us can you give us an insight into like the range of speaking fees and who's on top and how do you get into it and things like that?
Yeah, I don't care. My fee
Yeah.
in Canada is $15,000 for an hour. My fee in the US is $25,000 for an hour.
Oof.
And that
There you
20
go.
US and
If you want Ron
25.
at your wedding, 15 grand for a best man speech, he'll show
That's
up.
right. Yeah.
Bar
But
mitzvahs
yeah,
too. Bar mitzvahs too. Go ahead.
So that's what I charge, and that's what people pay. And now I pay a percentage. 20% goes to a speakers bureau.
What's the speakers bureau? You can shout it out there if you want.
It's Speaker Spotlight, which is the finest group of professionals in the business. They're the largest speakers bureau in the country.
Okay.
So typically, bureau won't touch anybody who's less than 5,000. Like, you need to, if you want to have representation, you need to be charging 5,000 an hour. What people get wrong is they think once they're signed to a bureau, then they have to stop doing all the work and that the bureau is going to get them all the gigs. And that is so wrong. I treat the bureau as being the people who can help me operationalize this and kind of be some kind of admin back end and whatnot. But I should be driving interest in Ron, not them. And they should align when a client says, I'm really looking for this type of person. Yes, sometimes they can say, well, Ron has a thing and he would be great for that. But I also know that they're also giving them, to be responsible client advisors, they're giving them 2 to 3 other people. You can go with Ron, and you can go with Mitch, and you can go with Scott. And you can go there's a price range in there. It's really tough. I've kind of peaked in Canada fee wise. It's really tough to go beyond 15 without being like, oh, you're the guy, you're Chris Hadfield. Oh, you're the guy that went to space. Like, you're the guy from that TV show. Or nobody knows Ron Tite on the street.
Is that what it takes? Do we have to jump out of a craft from orbit to become a great speaker like Chris Hadfield? Because if that's all it takes, I can do that. Give me a couple of months, I can figure that out.
Yeah. Well, there's an aspect of the fee which is based on fame, and I'm not famous.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm capped in Canada. There's only so far I can go because I may be the best speaker in the world. At the end of the day, they're going to go, who the hell is Ron Tite and why am I paying all this money for this guy? Even though I may kill it when I get there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just tough to sell. Now in the US, it's a different market and a different scale. So you charge more when you go to the US because you don't want to be a $5,000 speaker in the US.
No.
That's not good.
No. Okay.
Or it's really early in someone's career. They can be amazing, but they're really early in their career. They're not 10 years, 15 years in.
Oh, it sounds almost like musicians who you're looking to get picked up by a label and then make it in Canada and then try to break into the States as well. It's similar to that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Is Chris Hadfield the biggest guy speaking right now? Is he the main guy?
Well, in terms of number of gigs at Speaker Spotlight, which is the biggest in the country, its top 3 is usually it's me, James Cunningham, Chris Hadfield, Now maybe Sean Kanungo,
Don't know who
who's
that
in
is.
there. So we get kind of a lot of gigs. And me, Sean, James is a little more famous. James had a TV show and stuff, but Sean and I are like we're maybe LinkedIn famous, like 10,000 people, whatever. That's not famous. Nobody on the street knows who Ron Tite or Sean Kanungo is.
Hey, you're famous somewhere, which is important.
To 10 people.
Yeah.
So we're not driving the revenue that Chris is driving because his fee is significantly higher. And it's not for me to say what his fee is, but it's significantly higher because of who he is. He deserves every penny of that.
Okay. All right. I'm going to look into this speaking business, maybe figure something out.
It's the difference. And I get a lot of this, right? People are like, hey, I can talk.
Do they say it like that?
Yeah. Hey, I can talk. Why don't I make $15,000? All you just do is you just get up and talk. Look, come on. It's looking ridiculous.
Hey. Yeah.
So it's the difference between being funny at a party and being a professional stand-up comedian. That you can be funny at a party. That doesn't mean you understand the intricacies of working with producers and getting on stage and writing material and repeating scaling your skill,
personality.
Yeah. And that's a completely different mindset and a completely different skill. There are people who are way funnier than any comedian at parties, but they don't understand the other aspects of it. So they never get there. There are people who conceivably could be wonderful speakers, but they don't actually get the business. And so they just become frustrated because they think they should be bigger than they are.
Right. It's like that book, The War of Art. It's the difference between being an amateur and a professional. So
yeah, exactly. And a pro, they go about their, so here's the perfect example. I was doing a speech for, I don't know, it was a group of a couple hundred people, I think, north of the city. And in the bureau has the thing, and they go, this is, we've had a call and everything. I've written the speech for this group, customized the speech. But I show up at this point. I see this person. I speak from this time to this time. This is who's introducing me. I get all those details. So in my write-up, it says you're on from 2 till 3:30. Great. I have 90 minutes. I've prepared 90 minutes of material. 5 minutes before I go on, literally 5 minutes. The organizer comes over and he goes, so how long are you going to be? And I go, 90 minutes. He's like, what? I thought you'd be like 45 or 60. And I go, no. And I show him, I'm like, no, you filled out a thing that said I was going to speak for 90 minutes. He's like, no, this whole part of the thing is not, but you. And he goes, oh my God, what can we do?
This is 5 minutes before you go.
5 minutes. And I go, give me 2 minutes. I open up my computer. Okay, don't worry about it. He's like,
that's a pro. That's what a pro does.
This is what a pro does, right? I've done it enough times. I know the material. I can take it from 90 to 60 like that. Not a big deal. And I didn't need to adjust the slides. I just did that because I don't like the skip. But I was like, yep, got it, no problem. And he's like, I can't believe you're able to do that. I was like, this is why you're paying full fee, right? You're paying full fee because of this. You're paying full fee because if a fire alarm goes off, I know I'm going to how to deal with it. I know because if something happens, you need me to stop 20 minutes early, I can do that. No problem. And there are people who may be just as good in doing a straight hour, but it's all those other things where true professionalism comes in, and that is what you pay for, especially when you got 200 people in the room who are expecting, and who that speaker is gonna indicate how you're seen as a professional. It's gonna reflect on you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The mood of the audience is established by the speaker, and I mean, your energy is going to transmit to them, and that is going to transmit to the entire event. So you're absolutely right. I've seen some of your speeches on YouTube, and they are very impressive, I must say. You're just masterful the way you are able to kind of, I don't know, you never stumble on your words. You hit everything with a great rhythm. Very, very well done. Very professional.
Oh, well, thanks. That's stand up, and that's getting to do 70 a year, right? It's like,
the rhythm is really, you're really good at the rhythm. I find, you just have this great kind of way of saying things and then hitting. It's just it's something that people don't talk about a lot with speaking is rhythm. So
Yeah. Oh, well,
yeah.
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Very kind of you.
No problem. We're going to end off with 4 questions.
Okay.
We're going to ask you for your recommendations. And now this is going to be on record forever. This is
All
going to be
right.
on the internet forever. So just make sure you get your good recommendations. So we're going to
Thanks.
need one book, not your own,
Yeah.
one podcast, not your own, one album. I don't think you've cut an album, so I'm not going to say not your own, and one food. So
Okay.
book, podcast, album, food.
Okay. So book. I have so many great favorites. I go between nonfiction and fiction and everything else. But
I really like when I ask this question, people struggling with it. I enjoy that. So
yeah, I bet. I will say The Imaginary Girlfriend, written by John Irving.
Oh, John Irving. Okay. Yeah.
And nobody knows about this book because it's
I
not
don't.
like Garp and everything else.
Mhm.
When John Irving was a wrestler, which kind of finds its way into like Garp and other books. But he was a wrestler in college, and he discovers his love of writing. And he discovers his love of writing, and he loves it more than his wrestling. And he was on the college team, like he was a great wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And he discovers writing, much in the same way that I did. And he goes to his coach and says repeatedly, I can't go to practice. I can't go to the tournament. I can't go to the thing because I have to go I have to go see my girlfriend. His girlfriend was his writing.
It's out of boy, John Irving. That's really good. Yeah.
And so one of my greatest moments of my life was having dinner with the publisher of my second book and sitting in a restaurant beside John Irving.
Whoa, really?
And getting to tell him that story.
Oh, how did he react?
He was gracious. He was lovely. He was lovely because it's like everyone's like, oh, and Meanie and Garp, and I was like, Imaginary Girlfriend, and this is why. I was a wrestler. I did not know I could write, and I discovered it late in life. So that's the book.
Nice.
The album, I would say the album, and this is just kind of stuff that you go back and listen to License to Ill by the Beastie Boys, 1985.
Yep.
So here's 3 white Jewish kids from Brooklyn who decide that they're going to sample Led Zeppelin for hip hop. They just did it.
They sure did.
And when you look at the arc of their career, they look back embarrassingly at some of the aspects of that album, of who they were, and that their personality that came out of Fight for Your Right to Party, and that it was a joke to them that they were making fun of the bro frat crew. And in the end, those are the people who were coming out to their concerts who didn't get the joke.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see that the Beastie Boys, now some of you out there are saying like, well, they had some pretty misogynist lyrics, and they admit it to this day, and they're like, yeah, we did. And we changed our mind of what we think about that. And I think that's true growth. And I think so if you go back to experience what they went through and how they started, it's just such a really cool, it's an interesting moment in time in music. It's an interesting entrepreneurial journey for them. And it's also a great learning of who they are now, having lost one of their members and everything. I think it's just such an interesting arc.
Yeah. Have you seen the documentary that they put out a little while ago?
It's amazing. Even that, right? Of even like shooting a documentary live in front of an audience of them commenting with the B-roll and behind them, like it's just it was really, really, really cool.
They're great at just finding a twist on doing something, So
yeah,
great.
Yeah. A podcast.
Yep.
It's really weird. This is one of the things with the pandemic is that my podcast listening has decreased rapidly, because I used to do it on planes and trains, and and I do more virtual, and I used to listen kind of going into work. I don't go into the office as much, and so podcast listening has gone down. I would say I think if you go back to the early Malcolm Gladwell stuff of revisionist history, because the structure of that is the structure of that is I think something that we need more of. I think we need more podcasts that are highly produced, that are scripted, that are mini documentaries, opposed to, and I say this being one of the two dudes talking,
Yeah.
right? Which is what, and I love that. I love the conversational thing, but I think that when we did the Coup, we looked at Malcolm Gladwell and said, like, let's try and do something like that. So I like that as a structure, as an interesting thing.
That's
And
why I said that your podcast is better than my podcast, because it was very structured.
well, I just think it's a different thing. I think it's a different thing.
Absolutely.
I don't know that I could lead conversation as well as you do.
Oh, thank you.
I like, and so I just knew that I wasn't going to be good at that.
No, your podcasts are very cinematic when you listen to them. The sound effects, editing, everything. So
oh, yeah, it was like, but I was a team of people, right? Like, I'm not doing that. And then what was the fourth one?
Food.
Oh, food.
Yeah.
Food.
Tony said steak and potatoes, so that was his.
I don't know that nachos, like, to me, are just such an accessible, really difficult to fuck up, but when you get some great nachos, which is the blend of the cheese and the vegetables, and if you get meat on them and whatever, like sometimes like too many vegetables, not enough salsa, not enough sour cream, like there's all that kind of thing. I think I love a good nacho.
And it's just like a pile of them on the visual of the pile of the nachos is really
they're so ridiculously easy to make, and I never make them at home. It's like I love the restaurant. And you can't get them through delivery either, because they suck when they
they'll be cold. You can't eat nachos cold. That's ridiculous.
No. So I'll go nachos.
All right. That sounds the foods always does it for me. My mouth starts watering when people start mentioning their favorite food. So Ron, hold on tight. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I had an alt for your nickname. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah.
It's Ron, don't be so uptight.
Nice.
That's the alt. So
I think hold on is more apt for appropriate for the conversation is going to go where we don't know where the conversation is going to go.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Hold on tight. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for doing this. You're very good at kind of driving the conversation. I hope I didn't blab too much.
No. I love it. This is what I live for. So thanks again, Ron. Hold on tight. He's available for speaking. Anyone who wants to contact him. But thank you very much. This has been the Business Brains Podcast. We will see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.